Welcome to the Baby Playbook podcast. I'm very excited about this one because it is a dear friend of mine. I think I can say a dear friend now because I've been through the entire baby experience with this lovely person. Now, today's episode is all about baby sleep, and I want to preface this by saying baby sleep feels like, to me, it felt like a science degree that I didn't sign up for, but I had to complete within the first few months my baby was born. There was so much information, there was so much going on, I felt very unqualified, and so it's very overwhelming within these first six months, and it becomes quite a huge part of your life, figuring out your baby's sleep. But once you get a grip on it, all of a sudden you feel a lot more secure in who you are as a parent, how you're raising your baby, how your baby is coping day by day, and it's just such a huge change. So I'm a big advocate with focusing on your baby's sleep and getting it right. So one part of baby sleep is, and one question that you will ultimately Google when you are a new mom is, what is sleep training? That's where it all starts, and you go down this rabbit hole. Sleep training, which we'll talk about in just a moment, is something that holds a lot of stigma. There's a lot of misconception about it. There's a lot of information out there about this concept. And so today I am bringing in an absolute expert in this area, Tizzie Hall. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. It's very exciting to be talking to you on your podcast, your new podcast.
Thank you, Tizzie. So a little bit about Tizzie, an internationally renowned baby safe sleeping expert, and that's really important. Safe sleeping expert. You are the best-selling author of a very famous book called Save Our Sleep. It's been translated into 7 languages or something like that. I'm sure many copies are in mums' rooms right now on their bedside table, as is mine still. You have a long history of working with parents and babies, and now a lot of virtual assistants thanks to your amazing Facebook group, your website, your big team that is consistently helping parents figure out their baby's sleep. And I want to start, Tizzie, if you don't mind, with a story about you, because I think it says a lot about you and your passion for this topic. Is I joined Tizzie's Save Our Sleep Facebook community, the Sleep and Settling Clinic on Facebook, when Noah was born. Trolled through many a different comments trying to figure out what I thought was going on with Noah's sleep. And I remember very clearly there was a post from a mum. She was sharing a story about how she was really struggling to get her baby to sleep, and the baby was still in a bassinet because she didn't have the money to buy a cot yet, even though it was a safe age for that baby to move into a cot. And I remember reading this conversation between you and this mum where it ended that you said, hey, come to me, I will give you a cot and we will work this out. And I just thought, wow, this business owner, you're not in it for the money. You are literally, legitimately just wanting to help parents figure out their baby's sleep. It mind-blowing to me.
Well, it blows my mind sometimes because, social media, and you read on social media that, it's all about scaring mums and trying to make their babies safe and all about money. And one example of, that's so kind of you to share that story. And it's one of many stories, so I don't actually know which one it is because I do it all the time. We lend the bedding, we lend the safe cots. But something which I also think shows that we're not in it for the money is, you would have seen time and time again on my stories, somebody's dropped a lamb in Bondi, or someone's dropped, because we sell comforters. A skirt, bit of fabric with a head in the middle, which you put next to your baby while they sleep, and the red-nosed current advice is you don't leave it in the cot with your child unsupervised till they're over 7 months. So there's ways that you do it safely if they're under by not having it there alone. You're supervising them with it. But anyway, that's a whole other subject. But those comforters, if you drop one or lose one, if I was in it for the money, I would go, yay, you've got to come back to Save Our Sleep and buy a replacement. But I don't. I try so hard to return them to their family. And on the comforter is a little label that says, I'm loved and if lost, please contact Save Our Sleep. Now, I have to tell you a really funny story about that. Mother's Day, about 5 or 6 years ago, we got an email from this person and they said, I have found a bunny toy, sleep toy, on a boat ramp in such and such. And it was like this, it was like Sale or some strange named town that I'd never heard of. And I thought, there cannot be that many people out on Mother's Day with, you know. So anyway, I got on my thing and I did a search and I found 2 families in that town with several sleep comforters, and one of the families had this pink bunny, and I left a funny voicemail on their phone saying, "Hi, I'm Busy Bunny, and you've left me at the such and such boat ramp, and Edward from the such and such motel is minding me. Please come to the motel to pick me up. I want to come home." And it was like so funny because his family got the voicemail from their toy. They'd been given it kind of as a gift or something. They weren't 100% sure how I even had their phone number, but they had come back and bought a second one. That's how I had their phone number, but it was so funny. And yes, if we were about money, we wouldn't be making those phone calls on Mother's Day.
100%. That is such a great example, again, of just trying to, I guess, help parents figure out this wild part of life where you are trying to help your baby, you know, get some good rest. That's what it comes down to. Now, I want to kick off with a big question for you, because I think that you might even change the term that I use here. But let's start with, what is sleep training?
If you asked me what sleep training was when I started my business in 1996, that makes me even older than this video footage of me, I would have said it was about controlled crying, crying it out, teaching babies how to sleep, putting babies in bed and teaching them how to sleep. That's what I thought it was all about. Even when my book came out, that's what I thought it was all about. Now, I obviously didn't do controlled crying and I don't do cry it out. I like to think I do something different, but that's what I thought sleep training was, and that was my area of work. Trying to teach people not to do controlled crying, not to do cry it out, but in essence, that's what sleep training was. Roll forward to now, what is sleep training? I really think I'd love to get away from the term sleep training and call it sleep education. It's about educating parents about sleep. And when I opened up the hub, which was before COVID, I opened up a place where people could come. Lots of people drove from Melbourne down. We were based in Geelong. We weren't based in Geelong. We were based 40 minutes from Geelong, but we made this hub in Geelong, and all sorts of people came. And as you were saying, they would come and they would talk to me about having a non-sleeping baby, and I would send them away with a bundle of safe products and go, you don't need to do cry it out. You don't need to do control crying. All you need to do is change your baby's bedding. Now, roll forward another 3 or 4 years till now, COVID came, the hub shut down, etc. I have realised I want to change my whole business model and take it away from sleep training. I want to change it to prevention, because sleep training or sleep education, but let's call it sleep training for a minute, is needed in today's society because mothers are having babies and sometimes it's the first baby they've ever held or spent time with, and they don't understand their baby's sleep needs. So then it all goes wrong from day one. It all just starts going wrong. Like in the hospital, the baby has the correct bedding and the baby's cocooned and the baby sleeps, and then the baby comes home and people are scared of SIDS, scared of overheating. It all goes wrong. Suddenly they have a non-sleeping baby and then they don't seek help until maybe 8 weeks or 4 months or 6 months or even a year. And then they have to sleep train of some sort. I want to get rid of that, and prevention is better than the cure. So in the last 2 years, I would have realised that if we can get people like yourself, even though it was your second, not your first, and teach you how to use the correct bedding and the correct routine or feeding cues for your baby, so that you prevent sleep problems, you don't have to sleep train. So I think we need to change it to sleep education, and we need to start getting people to learn about it. I mean, you'd say this yourself. You go to a birthing class, half the time you don't even use what's in the birthing class. If you're like me, I found the other day my birthing plan for Dara, who's the first baby I brought home from hospital. I wanted a water birth. I wanted this music. I wanted something to drink. I wanted a water birth, so I was going to set up a water pool in a hotel near the hospital because I was too far from a hospital. I wanted a home birth, and I was too far from a hospital to have a safe home birth, and I wanted a water birth. So I had this great plan to set up this birthing pool in a hotel near the hospital, do most of it myself, and then I could go to the hospital if I needed to. Okay, none of that happened. He came at 28 weeks, boom, okay? So all those birthing classes and all those birthing plans out the window. And even people who have babies at 40 weeks, half the time, it's out the window. We need pregnancy sleep classes, education, not sleep training. What do you think?
100%. Well, this is part of why I've created this podcast, because I want that information out there for the post-birth period. So you've done all the prep, you've had your baby, and there's so many classes. You know, you're in the hospital, you're doing a bath class, you're doing a breastfeeding class, but then you are left to your own devices trying to figure out something as important as your baby's sleep and their rest and their settling. So I love that you're calling it sleep education. I think that's definitely the path that, you know, everybody should be taking, and just, I think, arming themselves with the knowledge to be able to navigate that period and to help, you know, settle their baby. So a few of the phrases that I think a lot of parents start to come across when they're even just thinking about or researching baby sleep is, I want to run through these, and perhaps you can just give us a really quick summary of what they mean. Is, let's go through first a sleep routine. What does that refer to?
So a sleep routine officially refers to, you know, you feed, play, and put your baby to sleep, okay? But as soon as you get the word routine, it becomes scary, because we've gone through all these different phases in life, and one of the things was everybody should formula feed your baby. If you're rich and you've got money and you're wealthy and you're living in a good country, you should formula feed your baby. It's much better than breastfeeding. Then we realised breastfeeding was best, so we've done a big spin. The word routine, sleep routine, is really important. We all know a baby sleeps much better if they have a routine, if they know when they're going to go to sleep, roughly. You know, children is an example. They want to watch the same show on Netflix over and over. Not the same, they want to watch the same episode of the same show, because they want to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. So a sleep routine is really good for a baby, because they want to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And if a baby is put on a routine, a sleep routine, especially if it's one like mine, which are done on what babies would do naturally if they were demand feeding. It's not, I didn't just go, I'm going to do a routine at this time, this time, this time. I set my routine on what babies did naturally in a country called Mozambique, where I watched demand fed babies. But the scary thing about the word routine is, as soon as you say sleep routine, people immediately think of feeding routine, and they immediately think a mum's breast milk is going to dry up. And that is true. If you put your baby on the same routine as a bottle-fed baby, on day one, your breast milk will most likely dry up. The difference with my sleep education and feeding program is we have a routine for the mother's breasts. You would know that. And it's different to the routine for a formula-fed baby. And it's all about when the mother's breast should be milked, which milked means expressing or feeding the baby, and then the routine works. So the sleep routine is about what time your baby sleeps, what time they're awake. So it's called the sleep, feed, play, sleep, feed, play. But the word routine scares people, because they don't understand that a breastfed baby can be on a routine, so they can sleep.
Right. And what about, you mentioned before a little bit about, you know, the stigma behind, or the concept of controlled crying, which was something that was implemented a little while ago. So talk to me then about self-soothing, or a lot of people will know it as self-settling.
So controlled crying is what people used to do when babies, I mean, in the old days, they used to say babies were spoilt. Now, they don't mean spoilt as in they got everything they want. They mean spoilt as in we didn't meet their needs. We didn't give them what they needed. So then they didn't learn how to sleep. So they've been like broken, probably more than spoilt. So they've come home from hospital. Every baby is born with the ability to sleep. Most babies are born with the ability to feed and sleep, okay? But if they don't sleep well, they can't feed well. And if they don't feed well, they can't sleep well. So it can get broken at the very beginning. If you roll the clock back and you have a baby where the mum or dad aren't educated properly, and they have this baby in hospital, and the baby sleeps really well in hospital, and then on the way out they're told, oh, be careful not to overheat your baby, be careful not to use bedding, be careful, and then they come home, and then they don't use bedding, and then the baby doesn't sleep properly, and then once the baby doesn't sleep properly, the baby doesn't feed properly, and then they have this spiral effect of no sleep and poor sleep. When that child then gets to sort of, well, when they get to 8 weeks, they start sleeping in daytime sleep cycles and the day sleep turns to crap. When they get to 6 months, they start sleeping in nighttime sleep cycles and they wake at sort of, let's say they went to bed at 7, they'd wake at 9 and then they wake at 11. And then by a year old, they're waking at 9, 11, 1, 3, you're up all night, okay? And now people have to fix it. And what happened was, people used to say the way to fix these babies is to do control crying, or some people said cry it out. And that is where you put the baby in bed and you say, it's time for sleep, I'm not coming in for X amount of time or X amount of minutes, and then they leave these babies to cry. And then with control crying, they go in and they say, Mummy loves you very much or Daddy loves you very much, and then they pat the baby or they touch the baby and then they walk back out again. And the baby goes from being doing an I'm trying to get to sleep cry to there's my mummy, I want to be picked up cry, to an emotional where have you gone cry. And it really doesn't work. And this control crying is horrible for the babies and it's horrible for the mums, and it causes mental health problems in both mums and babies. Now with the self-soothing as a newborn, if you have a newborn baby and you feed them correctly, so I believe on a routine, and you have the correct bedding and you put them in bed, they just go to sleep. They just self-soothe themselves. Or they lie in the cot awake and they're looking around and they're grunting and groaning, but that is normal, and they self-soothe. They never need to be taught how to sleep. And that's where we're going wrong, because it's like we think it's a rite of passage that every baby has to do sleep training. But they don't if their needs are met from day one.
Yeah, and that education is there. It's funny as well because as you're talking about everything, it's like a bit of a domino effect, right? If you don't get the one thing at the top and then all these different things pop down and everything's impacted. So I think important to have that knowledge and that education from the start, so then you can tackle whatever comes at you during the first few weeks, during the first few months, and with assistance and some help by your side, which is in the form of your book next to my bed. But the last term I wanted to also touch on, which is something that I remember reading about when I had both my babies, is sleep associations. And would you be able to just break it down in what is a positive sleep association and negative sleep association?
So everybody needs sleep cues. So we've got to go back and look at the brain, right? Your brain is awake, and you need to get from awake to asleep. So you yourself need to get from awake to asleep. Your children need to get from awake to asleep. Not when they're a newborn, because the first 8 weeks, they just feed, sleep, feed, sleep. If they've been fed correctly and they have the correct bedding, they just feed, sleep, feed, sleep. But from 8 weeks, they need some cue to tell their brain they're going from awake to asleep. Now, so that means that they need something which they can touch or feel or see or hear, and that tells them it's time to go to sleep, or it tells their brain, sort of, if I touch this, I'll start falling asleep. So then you've got positive and negative things. Now, I would say a negative thing is white noise. I think we are going to hear all sorts of problems about white noise in the future, because the brain never gets to fully rest if there's white noise. So I would call that a negative one. Another negative one is if you put a dummy in your baby's mouth and they're sucking on the dummy, that tells them, okay, I'm sucking, it's time to go to sleep. This dummy, I recognize that when mum puts this dummy in, she leaves me in bed and I sort of start falling off to la la land and sleep. But the problem with the dummy is, first of all, it causes the digestive system to work. So when the baby starts sucking, the digestive system starts working, and it's like the body thinks there's milk coming in, they digest their food too fast, so a baby with a dummy is hungrier. The next thing is, if they're sucking on a dummy and it stays in their mouth, their brain is always half concentrating on sucking, so they never reach deep, deep sleep. The other problem with the dummy is the dummy falls out, and if the dummy falls out, the baby can't get it to put it back in. So you may find that you've got to go in and out, keep putting the dummy in. But then you might be a parent who says, well, my kid had a dummy and we never had a sleep problem. But then when you talk to them, the dummy fell out, but they never went in and returned it. So the baby had to learn to self-settle with a different sleep association. So then that's not all the negative ones, that's just a couple. Positive sleep associations would be holding something or touching something when you fall asleep. Now, I touched on this at the beginning where I said, we used to have these comforters where you put it in the cot from newborn, and I would get a mum to take a comforter, which is a positive sleep aid, and you put it down your top, and it smells of you, and then you put it next to the baby when you fall asleep. But the new advice from Red Nose, which is our leading health authority in Australia, is, and I totally agree with it, because you can't say the Save Our Sleep comforters are safe, but the XY comforters aren't safe. So we've all got to get on the same page. And lots of my clients were coming to my website, looking at my comforters, knowing that they're safe. I would never sell anything that wasn't safe, but then seeing a cheaper version in a shop or being given a different version and then using a different version which wasn't safe. So we've decided that we are going to be telling everybody only leave the comforter in the cot with an unsupervised baby from 7 months, right? So then you'll be looking at me going, how does the baby go to sleep? Well, you put it down your top, they smell it, they feel it, you put it next to them as a newborn. Once they're asleep, you take it away. And then when they're between 8 weeks and 7 months, you might go in and put it in between sleep cycles, keep an eye on them, take it out. Okay. Once your baby is 6, 7 months, between sleep cycles, they're going to need something to get them from awake to asleep. So that is when, after 7 months, the comforter is what I would suggest to use. So the difference is a positive sleep aid is something that you can take everywhere and it's not going to interfere with the digestive system or their brain development. A negative one is something like white noise or a dummy or a massive big blanket that you've got to carry everywhere.
Yeah, and with, I guess, so many gadgets out there, my Instagram is filled with suggestions on what I should be buying. It can be quite overwhelming to just to figure out the association and what is actually quite beneficial and what is perhaps, not quite what you need to get your baby sleeping. So I want to ask you, we touched on a little bit of this, but for those parents who are thinking about this and thinking about whether when the baby comes, or maybe they do have a baby and they're thinking about starting to implement some sort of a routine, what can you share about the benefits? So somebody who's thinking, well, why should I do this? Why should I do this for my child? Why should I do this for myself? What are the key benefits you would say?
I think the benefits are your baby doesn't cry. Most babies on a routine don't cry because they never have to do the hungry cry or the cold cry or the tired cry, because you sort of fill in their needs before they need to cry. So you're putting them down in bed. I mean, the old-fashioned phase was don't wake a sleeping baby, but you're putting your baby down in bed on the Save Our Sleep program. They have the correct bedding, they're being fed at the correct time, so they sleep. They don't always sleep. 7 p.m. they don't sleep, and you have to hold them at 7 p.m. often in the early days, but most of the time they sleep. You then come in just before the feed time and you pick them up, so they don't have to wake and root and cry for a feed. Also, you can make appointments because you can, especially, I mean, I've got my podcasts, which they're older podcasts, I don't have any current ones. But especially if you go and look at those on getting out and about in a routine, there's some great tips because we say things like, if you want to make an appointment to go to your friend's house and go and have a coffee with your friend, in the morning you put your baby down in bed, you then have your shower and whatever else while your baby's sleeping. You then get your baby up just before their feed time and you transfer them to the pram, like 20 minutes or 40 minutes before. You transfer them to the pram and you walk to where you're going, or you transfer them to the car and you drive to where you're going. Then when you get there, you can feed your baby because you know when your baby is going to want to feed. So you can make appointments. Also, in the evening between sort of 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, that's so you can do everything. You can go to the supermarket, you can do all this other stuff because you know that's the time your baby doesn't need to sleep as well. So I think the routine helps parents make appointments, helps them have a life, helps them know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. It helps them interpret their baby's cries in the early days, because in the very early days, if the baby starts crying and they look at the routine and they go, it's like 11:15 and their baby's crying at 11:15, and they look at the routine and the routine says you feed the baby at 11, and you go, oh, that must be my baby's hungry cry. Now, we don't say, don't feed your baby till 11 o'clock. We say, try to not feed your baby till 11 o'clock, but if your baby is really crying, feed your baby. You learn the cries. So, and also mental health. So many people, their mental health is so much better if they can get out and about once a day in the fresh air, and if their baby isn't crying, and if the baby's mental health is better if they're getting good sleep. So they're all like really important factors with following a routine. Then other mums say, I don't follow a routine, I would never follow a routine, routine's not for me, I can't even look at the book, I don't want it to work. But then when you chat to those mums, or dads, they get up at the same time roughly every day. They don't have a shower and then brush their teeth one day and then the next day brush their teeth and have a shower. They have an order. They do it in the same order. They don't brush their teeth, eat breakfast, have a coffee differently every day. You know what I mean? They have an order to their life. So they have a routine without knowing they have a routine. So the word routine can be scary, but when they think about it, they actually have a routine. And then for those mums who don't want a routine and they want to demand feed, that's an important topic actually to discuss. With the Save Our Sleep routines, you demand feed at night, and that's really important for your breast milk. And also, you can follow the Save Our sleep program and demand feed. In order to do that, there's a book called Save Our Sleep Feeding, and that teaches you. So it basically says you demand feed, but then you make sure you don't put your baby to sleep within this amount of time of a feed, and you make sure you use the correct, and so on. So you can demand feed. But the importance of the routine, I believe, it gives you good mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I have to second that. I think when you become a parent, you start to realize that your personality influences a lot of your parenting. So for me, I am a very organized. I like to know what's happening. It just gives me a little bit of calm and peace in my day. And at a time when you have a baby and your calm and peace has all of a sudden disappeared, it's nice to have an element of that. It's nice to have a guide. And a lot of the time, I know, you've referred to your routines as guides because you understand that some babies go through them quicker, some babies go through them slower. And that's what you start to, I guess, arm yourself with, is this understanding of the guides and puzzling your baby into where they fit at that time. And it's just really nice when you don't have the answer to something. It might be that baby's very unsettled, you're trying to decipher what happened that morning. What you perhaps did wrong is you open up this book and it just has some suggestions and potentially some answers. And I think that's really comforting to people who are lost at that time.
And something about them being guides is something which, so I had my first baby at 28 weeks. I had other babies who didn't make it home from hospital, but were the ones who made it home from hospital. My first who came home from hospital was a 28-week Dara, and my second who came home from hospital was Killian at 34 weeks. But then my third who came home from hospital was Kieran, who was born at 31 weeks. And what's really interesting is people talk about corrected age and actual age and corrected age. Now, only prem parents really understand this. It means, Dara was born at 28 weeks. His corrected age, he left hospital at 10 weeks. His corrected age would have been 38 weeks from conception, but his real age was 10 weeks, his actual age. So that's kind of what that is. But I never corrected age or anything with my own children and I never thought about it with other people's children, until when I had Kieran, my third. I was really good friends with Killian's best friend, was called Eamon, and his mum, I always call her a brain scientist. She was a doctor, but I call her a brain scientist. She had people's brains on her desk brains had been given for research, and it amazes me, Anyway, I kept saying, Kieran's not smiling. The maternal health nurse keeps saying, Kieran's 6 weeks, he should be smiling. He's not smiling. Now, we now realise that Kieran had a face palsy. He had a syndrome from forceps delivery, and there was issues, which is very different. I'm very complicated. But anyway, I kept saying, he's not smiling. And she kept saying to me, Tizzie, from conception, he's only 38 weeks. And then it got me thinking about my routines. Like, if you think about how that baby starts off this size, and then they're this size, and then they're this size, and then they're this, and in those first few weeks, how would they grow, right? Then you might have your baby at 30, we're talking about full-term babies, yeah? You might have your full-term baby at 39 weeks, and then your sister, if you have one, might have her full-time baby at 41 weeks. And let's say you gave birth to them on exactly the same day, yeah? Well, your baby her baby is actually 2 weeks older than your baby from conception, but we don't allow for that. So then when you look at my routines, they are guides, because I say to move routine at 4 weeks, but you might be ready to move routine at 4 weeks. But she might have needed to move routine at 2 weeks because her baby is actually 2 weeks older, but we don't allow for that. And that's why they really need to be guides.
Yeah, and I do love that you also mentioned that there is, assistance there as well and guides for mums who would like to demand feed. So there's a range of options for you. It's just the education that is within there that is really beneficial to any type of parent, whatever they decide in terms of their baby's sleep. Now, I want to ask, you mentioned there a little bit that there are different types of parents, but it does, and I feel like I have experienced that stigma of, oh, I followed a routine with my baby, and all of a sudden there's a lot of opinion about that. Some positive, some negative. I want to ask you what you would like to change about that stigma. What would you wish for in terms of a world that we could live in where baby sleep and routines and help and education is, at the forefront and judgment is way behind us?
Well, I think the easiest way to change that is get rid of social media. And we can't get rid of social media because I make a living from social media. But I'm a little bit over the social media because it's the social media who is putting people into these, you're this type of parent, you're that type of parent. Like I said, someone came the other day onto the live chat on my website and they said, oh, I want to do Maria Montessori and I'm looking for a floor bed. And I was like, oh, yes, right, with Maria Montessori, this is what we need to do. You need to go to Kmart or Target and you need to buy one of these mats, the bouncy mats that's really hard to get hold of. Yeah. You get one of those and you put it in the middle of your bedroom floor, in the baby's bedroom floor, and then you buy a Save Our Sleep firm single bed mattress and you put that in the middle of it. And she goes, oh, what about a floor bed? And I said, no, floor beds aren't safe because floor beds are a frame and your baby could have an attachment problem and you need a soft mat in the middle of a room and then a mattress on the mat. And then if your baby falls off the mattress, yes, on the very odd occasion, your baby might break an arm or your baby, it won't, but it might, okay? But if you have a floor bed, which is a frame for this mattress on the floor, your baby can get stuck and can suffocate between the edge of the floor bed and the mattress and so on. And then this woman goes, oh, wow. And I was giving her all these tips on how, and she went, I thought Save Our Sleep was so the other way. And I was like, no, I'm Maria Montessori's biggest fan. And that's one example. And this is why I want to change the stigma, where everyone is just pushed into these different types of parenting when you don't have to be one type of parenting. You can be a bit of everything parenting. Like I am so laid back. I would be one of the most laid back parents when it comes to some forms of parenting, right? I don't look at my kids' school reports. I don't care about the marks. I don't talk to them about the marks. I want my kids to be healthy, okay? I don't really worry about what my kids eat. Like having said that, Kieran doesn't have Coke. Someone's 2-year-olds the other day were drinking Coke. I nearly died of shock. Kieran only drinks milk and water. I'm laid back about what they eat or drink, and they seem to make healthy choices. But then, when it comes to going places, when it comes to sleepovers, when it comes to school camps, I am a mental fruitcake. My anxiety goes through the roof. I can't handle it. I can't be characterised into a certain type of parent. I'm a bit of everything, so all of these pushing everybody into these little pots, they're not. You can be a bit of everything.
Yeah, I really love that type of thinking, and especially in this day and age where everybody's categorized, there's all these different trends, and you're just trying to find which one you're aligning with. Now, on that topic, alongside the trends, there's also a lot of approaches. There's a lot of sleep consultants. There's a lot of gadgets that claim that they will fix your baby's sleep. There's a lot that you are exposed to within those first few months. It can be very overwhelming. What's your advice for parents, I guess, cancelling out the noise? And I think even just focusing on the one approach. Because I know a temptation is that you could try something and then you panic because it's not working immediately and then you switch it up. It's very overwhelming.
Okay. So I would be saying, look at what supports you for the whole of babyhood. So find a program or a gadget that will support you from 0 to 2. You've got this white noise gadget, but what does it do to help you if your baby's crying? Like, you need to find an approach that takes you from 0 to 2. Then there's a doctor out there, a really He sort of appeared on the scene about 4 years ago, and a massive sleep program, and everyone follows it. But I love it because all of these people give my advice out. Like it's like I'm the old granny that they've all listened to. So half of these sleep experts out there all use did you know I invented the term dream feed? And then they all use it.
Really?
Yes, which is pretty amazing. Yes. So, okay, so with the term dream feed, I went to a lawyer and I asked if I could trademark the term dream feed because it was my term, and he said that would be like dream feeding roasting. You can't dream feed I'm roasting a chicken. You can't dream feed you can't trademark I'm dream feeding a baby, but everyone uses it and then people spell it wrong, which upsets me because it's really one word. But yeah, I would cancel out the noise by saying, I want an approach or a gadget or something which is going to take me through the whole of babyhood, And it's hard though. It's hard to cancel out the noises, especially when you've got a crying baby and something says it's going to fix you. Also, customer service. Like, get on to these websites or these Facebooks or these support groups and see how much they're willing to help you before you've invested money. Because sometimes you'll put all this effort into it or money into it and they don't do anything to help you. I don't know. You'd be better at suggesting how to cancel out the noise because you've done it.
That is true. I mean, my big tip there is, I think, very similar to you. I think what I say to my friends now is pick an approach, stick to it. Even if it's not working 2, 3, 4 weeks in, stick to it, because every approach will end up with results if you are consistent. And I think that's the main lesson I learned from sticking to Save Our Sleep. We had little bumps in the road. We had, things that we needed to figure out, for which the Facebook group was a godsend. But because I stuck to it and because of consistency, we got there in the end. So that is my advice, very similar to your advice of, I think as well, having something that will guide you not just in the first few months, but that prolonged time until your baby becomes a toddler, and then even from there, because you have a toddler book. So it's really an extension and continues to go and grow. So Tizzie, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing so much in this. I want to make sure people can stay connected with you and get that sleep education. So of course you have your book, Save Our Sleep. There's also Save Our Sleep Feeding and Save Our Sleep Toddler. You can help on the website, saveoursleep.com. You also have your Instagram, your YouTube, which has very useful videos, hands-on, to show parents, how to put their baby to sleep, and all different things. Visual is always great when you need a quick little Google search of what you're doing. And on Facebook, you have those videos, but then alongside that, you have the Happy Baby Sleep and Settling Clinic, which is a Facebook page that you can join, and you can pop in questions, you can ask for assistance. And what I love about it is it's not just you and your team, but it is every Save Our Sleep mum that is doing the same thing. So a lot of the time I never had to ask a question because the question had been posted and it was really easy for me to search and find.
Yeah.
So thank you for setting up that community and sharing this knowledge. I'm 100% going to have you on the podcast again about a different topic. There's so many different elements.
Oh, there's so much.
We could be talking and talking. But also, before we finish, Tizzie has amazingly offered to do a little giveaway with us and the listeners, which is really exciting, which includes a new sleeping bag and blanket from the Save Our Sleep range. You can even pick your color if you win, which is really exciting. So all you have to do is hop on my website. That's heynicolinak.co, heynicolinak.co, and you can pop your email in there to enter the giveaway, and hopefully you can get yourself set up, even maybe perhaps before the baby's here or whilst the baby's here, and you can get that sleeping bag on, that blanket, and get going with it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tizzie. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. And this podcast is going to be so good for all those pregnant mums and new families out there.